Hi, welcome to video number 18. In this video, I want to talk about the different artifacts, and we can consider them as tools that we create as interaction designers during the design process. And what I want to emphasize here is actually these artifacts and tools are created for a reason, which is basically to support the design process. Now, why do I want to talk about this people-made objects, so these objects that are made by us when we do design? That's because I get a lot of questions from students and also from practitioners. When I visit practitioners at the office sites and the studios, they often ask me, so what do you think of my persona? What do you think of my user journey? Do you think it's good? I find it very difficult to answer that question of whether something is good or not, because I think whether it's good or not depends on what it is made for and what the goal of making something is. So I want to explain that so that you can hopefully start thinking more carefully about the stuff that you create when you conduct interaction design. One of the things that I do have a lot of experience with is actually thinking about artifacts and thinking about tools and thinking about how to best use them to support design process. That is, for those who are interested, what a branch of research, what we call design research. So it's actually researching how we do design. Now, why do we spend so much time creating tools and artifacts in interaction design? Well, as you know, every time we start an interaction design process, you end up doing your user research, you think about this, and then you analyze your user research data, and then you end up creating a persona. But the persona doesn't end up in the final design solution. Okay, so some of you might say, well, why do we create them? Why don't we just go and do the design solution itself? Well, this is because different tools that we create are used and can be helpful, but at the different stages of the design process, okay, to support the design. Okay, so basically, persona is used in the beginning to support different goals to a user map, which is later in the design process, to support a different goal. Just like a prototype is being used and an evaluation report is being used later on in the design process to support different goals. So in all, the different tools and artifacts that we create in an interaction design are used for different purposes. Number one, they help us make decisions more transparent. So whatever we decide to include or not to include, to make a feature of in our design solutions should be, and in some artifacts, the job is actually make it more transparent so that other people in the team can see what we were thinking. Okay. Sometimes the tools and the artifacts that we create is used as a way to inspire new ideas. Is to kind of, while you're doing that and once you finish creating it, it's hopefully allow you to think of things that you haven't thought about or features that you haven't thought about in a design solution. Sometimes it's about keeping the design solution focused on your target user. So the artifacts, one of the artifacts' job is actually to ensure that the team it's reminded of who the target user is. Sometimes it's about identifying potential problems, and sometimes an artifact is also used as a way to experiment with different ideas before it becomes too costly to implement. Okay, so once you start coding something, it's when you start getting things built, it becomes too costly. So some artifacts are really good and are used to experiment with ideas, to try out different ideas. So let's go back and think about what these tools are. What tools are created for? Tools are created to help us do the design. Okay. On the left of the screen, you'll see some of the most common tools that you get taught and talked about in interaction design. So they're like personas, scenarios, and in this course, user experience stories. Sometimes people have to make design briefs, the journey maps, storyboards, paper prototypes, high fidelity prototypes. There's also evaluation reports and all sorts of deliverables that you're asked to create during a subject. Okay, so of course some of you ask, so how do I get good marks? How do I ensure that it's good? Well, the answer is actually in the middle and the other part of the slide is that whether it's good or not, it depends on whether it's effective. So is it doing its job? And what's the job? is it effective in helping us achieve our design goal? Okay, remember that different tools are created to achieve different design goals. And if you look to the right, and what is it to be effective? So I say, well, is your tool effective or not? Well, to be effective, we need to first know what the purpose is or what the design goal is that we want to achieve with the goal, with the tool. Okay, if you want to create a persona, okay, and if you want to create an effective persona, you must first need to know what the goal is to use a persona. So unless you understand what the goal of using a persona is, you won't know what an effective persona is. Okay, so don't ask, and then only when you know what an effective persona is, then you know it is a good persona, but for that particular context. Okay, and the other thing we must understand also, which is not so focused in what we're talking about, but also important, is that even if we create an effective tool, like a persona, that meets the goal, okay, we must also understand how to use the tool properly to achieve the goal. Okay? It's like, yes, I can get you a really effective knife to cut steak, but if you don't know how to use the knife properly, you still won't be able to cut steak properly. Okay? So for example, at the bottom, whether our persona is effective or not depends on whether we know what the goal we want to achieve with the persona when we create the persona. So when you go around and creating personas to hand out to me, and if you don't know what we're going to use it for and how we're going to use it, then you're not likely going to be creating a good persona. Okay, I'm going to talk about that more in the persona lecture. Okay, in the next lecture. And also, besides knowing the goal of what we want to achieve with the persona, you must also know how to use the persona. So there's no point creating a persona, but you don't know what to do with it. Okay, so this is really important for you to understand at this stage when you're doing an advanced subject, like an advanced interaction design, to understand that, tools are created for a reason. Okay? And it is your job to really understand and realize what the job is so that you can create a tool that can best do the job. And also you need to understand how to then use the tool to get the best result when you do the job. So the goals, so take for example, what are the goals we're trying to achieve with the persona? To me, the goals of the personas are three things. Number one, it's a way to remind the design team of who the users are. So it kind of keep them present and keep them in the moment when you're doing design in the studio. They are on the wall, they have a big picture, and you can read them from afar, and you are reminded who they are, just in case when you start doing different ideas and stuff like that, and you think, well, would Sally want this? Is this appropriate for Tom? Okay. Number two, it is used to provide inspirations for design solutions. And just as what I said, when we think about Tom and when we think about Sally, when we think about Harry that's on the wall as a persona, we are able to and should be able to look at the persona, look at the content of the persona and say, what kind of design solutions would these people want? What kind of solution, what kind of interaction would this person want? What kind of modality, whether it's audio, or whether it's pictures, or whether it's actually a very complicated interaction, or whether it's going to be a fun interaction, or whether it's going to be a very simple interaction. That should be drawn and inspired from the different personas that you have in front of you. And finally, as I've just demonstrated, it is also a source for asking questions about proposed design features and solution. If I design an app and I say, yeah, I want them to be able to do this, then you should be able, I want my users to be able to do this, then you ask, well, would Tom, as a person, from what I have in the persona, do I have enough information there for me to understand whether Tom would want to use this solution? So it is, the persona itself should be a very helpful artifact or tool to do all these things. And if it doesn't, and if I look at your persona and it doesn't, and it doesn't have the information to do all that, then it's not an effective one, which means that it's not a good persona. So the good persona is an effective persona. It is one that can help the designer or the design team to meet the three goals very well. These goals are different for another tool. Of course, when we go and do a user journey map, it's a different tool and have different goals. If it doesn't meet this quality, then it is not an effective tool. So before you ask, how do I create a good persona or a good user experience story, for example, ask, what goals do I want to achieve with this tool? So once you know the goal itself, then you can go back and say, well, this is how I need to create my persona and my user experience stories. And once you understand the goals, then you'll have a clearer idea about how to create an effective tool in order to achieve that goal. So this is a quick summary. When you create goals, create tools like personas, user experience stories, journey maps, and all the stuff that you're going to create, before you ask me or you ask your tutors, what is a good deliverable? Okay, ask yourself, what is an effective deliverable? Number one, understand what you want to use the tool for first. Okay, what's the goal? What do you want to achieve with it? Okay, is it to get inspiration? Is that to convince the stakeholder that they should give you more money? Is that to remind the team of the users? Then create a tool, and then you must check to ensure that it's effective. Don't just create it and then just say, oh, it's done. But does the tool work? Can the tool help you achieve that goal effectively? You need to try it out, and you might need to change stuff. Okay. Number two, understand how to use the tool properly. Okay, so this is doing the trying out as well. Okay, how can I ensure that I can achieve the goal with this tool? And if not, number three, know and understand when and how to adapt the tool in order to ensure that it is effective. So knowing when the circumstances that you need to change something, adapt, modify something, so that you can make sure that the tool can achieve the intended goal. As I will talk about in the persona video next, when we use personas and when we create personas as a tool in user experience design, we must include experience inside the persona itself. Okay, when you're doing user-centered design, it's not so important. But when you're doing user experience design, so the experience and the past and the present must be even more important. Because I've taught you in lecture 1, 2, 3 that the past, the present, and the future, and the different factors that affect people's experiences, and how experiences are described, like with action, thoughts, feelings, and how context and our environment affect our experiences. Some of that needs to come into the persona. So a persona for user experience story should be different, needs to be adapted to fit into the goal of what you want to achieve in user experience design.